Hello, it's me again, Damien Gatto, here for another reaction video. Now the videos plural that I'm going to react to are by Mr. Nightmare. Great channel, be sure to check him out. The first one is when people find creepy hidden rooms in their houses. So let's have fun and get this party started. Now without further ado, let's go.
By Joseph Robinson and took place in 2017. He had just moved into his first apartment after moving out of his parents' house. It was an old two-story home built in the 1930s and had been converted to 3 units, with 2 downstairs units and 1 upstairs unit. Joe was in the upstairs unit, which was a decent-sized 2-bedroom unit with a large kitchen and a pantry. He lived with his German Shepherd. At the time, only one of the bottom units was rented out, and he knew this because there was a car parked under one of the 3 spaces in the back of the building. That was the only way he could know someone was there, as they never left the house. And Joe knew this because he worked from home most days and did event photography during the night at a local theater. Throughout the time Joe would be home during the day, he never saw anyone leave the bottom unit, but he knew someone was there because he could hear the sounds of someone walking around and talking. After living there for almost 3 weeks, Joe started to notice strange things, like rustling in the living room walls and a thumping coming from the guest room. If he left the house, he would come back to find things moved around and sometimes missing. He had the management company change all the locks, but even after this, these strange things would continue. One night the theater was closed for repairs, so Joe didn't leave the house that night. Joe's brother needed to borrow his car as his was in the shop. The house was about a 10-minute walk from the downtown car garage where his brother had just left his car, so Joe's brother just walked over to borrow his car. The two caught up a bit, and then he took Joe's car to do whatever it was he had to do. Joe stayed inside for the rest of the day and got caught up on some editing he had been putting off. At around 9:30 p.m., he started to hear a voice down the stairs leading to the front door. The way the house was set up, there was a door that led outside a little entryway with a staircase that led to the actual apartment upstairs. This entryway shared a wall with the occupied unit upstairs. So Joe thought it was just the echo coming from the downstairs neighbor. However, it started to get louder and louder until he could clearly hear what the man was saying. He was arguing with himself and laughing hysterically. He kept telling himself it was time, only to follow up with a loud and aggressive no. Joe started to get a little freaked out and debated calling the police multiple times, but after about 45 minutes...
I don't know if you should call police or an exorcist at this point. Just saying.
He stopped and everything was quiet again. Feeling uneasy but too tired to stay up, Joe decided to call it a night early. On this night, Joe's dog was with him. She usually would stay at his parents' house when he wasn't home or when he'd leave at night for his photography work. But since he was off that night, she stayed with Joe the whole day. The two got into bed and went to sleep around 11 p.m. And it wasn't until around 4 a.m. that he woke up to the sound of his dog growling. Not a soft growl like when a dog sees a cat. Joe described it as a deep, rough, I'm gonna tear you apart kind of growl. He jumped up and went looking for her, and she was in the kitchen facing the pantry. As Joe rounded the corner, he heard the sound of a door slam in the pantry. However, once he got to the pantry, the door was still open. Joe's dog continued to growl and walked into the pantry and started pushing on the back shelf. Joe went in after her and turned on the light. He noticed a very small gap between the back shelf and the wall of the pantry, and so he pushed on it, and this revealed a secret room behind the pantry. Joe's dog tried to run inside, but he caught her before she could go too far.
No, don't let your dog go in there, because it's going to come out in ribbons. But that is terrifying. If I found that, I'd be going to whoever else, if I'm renting this place, if I'm renting that, and I find that, I'm going back to my landlord and saying, can I just have my deposit back? I'm out.
There was a small hallway with a drop down at the end of it. Joe didn't go inside though. He called the police immediately. They came and he explained the situation. They went downstairs and got Joe's neighbor to open his door. What they found was disturbing. They found a large hunting knife and a panel missing from a wall in his closet that led to the room in Joe's pantry. The building owner said it was what was left after the renovation that turned the home into 3 units. Joe moved out that week. Shortly upon moving into their new home, the Utah couple found something that wasn't included on the listing for their home. That might sound exciting, but what they found, to them, was anything but exciting. The couple stumbled across a hidden room in their house, and it looked exactly like a torture dungeon. The couple found the entryway to this hidden den behind a pretty average-looking bookcase in a room that appears to be just an ordinary lounge. The wife/mother said that the bookcase positioned against the wall looked off, so she decided to try and move it elsewhere. And this was when she soon realized that the bookcase was actually secured on and was disguising a secret door that the couple had no idea existed. The room wasn't included on the listing.
Well, damn. You know something? This is creepy, but I have to admire these people's creativity when it comes to making these secret rooms. I'm just saying. Merited, these guys are probably psychopaths, but you have to admire the creativity. I mean, that hinge system alone.
Nor mentioned by the realtor or the previous owners of the home. The woman shared pictures on Reddit showing the stages of her opening the bookcase before revealing the creepy room lurking behind the wall. The image taken relies strictly on the flash from the phone's camera, but it shows the concrete room that contains one random fold-out chair sitting in the middle of the room. Various other objects can be seen around the space that led Reddit users at the time this was posted to speculate that the room could have been used as some kind of torture room, or even used as some kind of bunker for a killer. Of course, Reddit and the internet in general will always come up with wild theories, and while finding this room in your house would definitely be a bit creepy, there's no proof the room was ever used for malicious purposes. The couple later turned the room into a mini gym. However,
well, not a bad idea.
For a much more mysterious Reddit post that was posted 4 years ago in April of 2019 similarly shows a picture of an entrance to a hidden room in somebody's house. The only difference here is the Redditor who posted this never made a follow-up post or uploaded any pictures of what was beyond the door. The Redditor who shared this found this creepy-looking door hidden in his basement, and what made it extra weird was that there was a big metal shelf purposefully blockading the door, as if to deter anybody from entering. The Redditor claimed it was done so by the previous owner. The post contained no additional info, but what makes this whole thing
you might want to move out after that then. But the other hidden room, turning it into a gym, not exactly a bad idea. I mean, it's just a hidden room. I mean, you can actually turn it into anything if you know what you're doing. But besides that,
stranger was that this was the last post to ever be made from this Reddit account. This was a pretty active Reddit account before this post. Because of this sudden disappearance after this already mysterious Reddit post, some people speculated that the person did in fact enter the room and found something in there. Something that may have led to his disappearance or death. People have tried to find out more details about the Redditor to find out where he lived and find any possible news articles relating to disappearances. But there has been no luck. For now, whatever happened here remains unknown.
well, damn.
Next one comes from viewer Milad Hussein, who's a father of a teenage girl currently in military school. Recently, Milad had been cleaning out his house with his buddy Jacob, and suddenly out of nowhere, Jacob started yelling for Milad, saying that he found a small hidden door in his daughter's room. Milad had the permission from his daughter to clean her room before doing so. He was shocked to hear the words hidden door, and so he ran to his daughter's room and found Jacob in the closet. There was where Jacob found a secret doorway, which once opened, led to a stairway that led to a basement area that Milad had no idea of. His landlord never told him about it. Milad included this image of the stairs leading to the small basement. Once they got to the basement, they found themselves in a small room with a horrid smell. So horrid, in fact, that the two men considered leaving the basement altogether. Inside the basement was a small table covered in weird dark red stains with a big book, a total of 28 pens which had no ink left, and a mountain of trash with an old laptop on the table. The two men wondered if someone used to live down there a long time ago simply based off how old the laptop was. Milad then decided to look inside the book, and he was heavily disgusted by its contents. There were writings of somebody's plans to brutally slaughter the bullies from school, and he recognized the handwriting to be that of his daughter. One short passage in the book read, "Goodbye, world, goodbye," There's nothing in this world. I'm useless. I have a Glock in my hand while writing this. I will pull the trigger anytime soon. I'm slowly destroying myself. Help me. On another page of the little diary, there was a note that said, I will rip Blank into shreds and drown her in her own blood. I have no remorse for what I'm doing. I am aware that I'm going to murder someone who caused me pain and shame for the past 9
Okay, someone has a lot of deep-seated anger they might want to deal with.
years. You will regret it. Say hello to my new weapons. The third image from the diary he attached was a diagram of her school and her plan on targeting it and her bullies with her friend who was experiencing the same issues as her. Unfortunately, all the images were pretty blurry. I'd say it's safe to assume Malad confronted his daughter after finding these notes, but I was never able to get confirmation from him as he never replied to any of my emails, unfortunately. That story comes from a viewer named Sal from Hope Mills, North Carolina. In the summer of 2022, he and his friend Connor moved into an upstairs apartment in a two-family home in town. They didn't sign a lease or anything. It was a listing they found on Facebook Marketplace that offered month-to-month rentals. Sal contacted the landlord, Tom, who did not live in the house. There was a tenant already living in the downstairs apartment who drove a red pickup truck that was almost always in the driveway. The upstairs apartment was decent, nothing too modern or fancy, but they saw it as a nice temporary place to escape from their parents' houses. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, ample closet space, a living room, 1 bathroom, and a small kitchen. The 2 bedrooms were on opposite sides of the floor, with a long hallway connecting them, and the living room in the middle of the hallway. All of the rooms and the hallway were carpeted. There was a big closet in the hallway that would otherwise be used as a jacket closet, but given that they were only going to be there for the summer, they were going to use this as a small storage closet. Right from the get-go, Sal would feel like he'd be hearing noises coming from above the apartment, usually cracks in the wood that he would keep dismissing for normal house noises. But on one of the first nights in the apartment, right above Sal in his bed, he heard what he was almost positive were footsteps. The cracks in the floor were moving, and they were at a steady pace. Sal went over to Connor's room and knocked on the door to ask him if he was hearing the sounds too, but by this point, the cracks stopped. Sal freaked out Connor with this because they were already on the upper level. Anything above them would be the attic, but they were not told of any attic by the landlord. The next day, Sal texted Tom asking if there were an attic, and Tom replied no there wasn't, and that any sounds that would come from above would just be the pipes. So once again, Sal would dismiss the sounds he heard for house noises.
Pipes don't have feet.
The sounds would continue for a few nights. Then one day, after getting home from work, Sal was home alone. Even the downstairs tenant was out. So even in the seemingly empty house, there were clear as day footstep type sounds coming from above Sal's head. He decided to look around the place for a potential attic door. There were no attic doors in either of the bedrooms or living room. He checked the big closet in the hall, and he noticed something peculiar. There was a hanging plastic garbage bag blocking something. He moved it aside to realize there was a white door, and beyond the door was a stairway leading up to another door. Sal quietly went up the stairs and opened the rickety-looking wooden door at the top, and what was beyond the door was the last thing he ever expected. There was a cramped, unkempt-looking apartment up there. He caught just a glimpse of a small, dirty kitchen, a living room with a small, old sofa, and an open doorway that led into what he presumed to be a bedroom. Sal stated that it smelled like human waste up there, and the unbearable stench was about to chase him out of there anyway, before he heard cracks in the floor come from inside that small bedroom-looking room. Sal quickly left the floor back down the stairs he came up. He locked himself in his room and called 911. When the police got to the house, Sal led them up the stairs and showed them the secret passageway to the secret upstairs floor, and the police found a homeless-looking and smelling man in a small bedroom on the 3rd floor. When Sal told the landlord, he arrived on scene and came clean, explaining that the man on the 3rd floor was his troubled brother, and he needed a place for him to stay. The 3rd floor that was once an attic was secretly converted to a small living space, but it lacked a bathroom, hence the horrid smell. And according to what the police told Sal, there was human feces in the sink up there. Sal and Connor had only been in that apartment for a few days, but that would have meant at some point that man likely came down into their apartment and may have taken food from them. The landlord was arrested for breaching a number of tenant privacy rights, which even without a lease, month-to-month renters are still protected under these laws. Sal and Connor both pressed charges on top of this, and they moved out all of their stuff the same day this happened with the police nearby.
Now to 4 horrific true church horror stories.
When I was in high school, I had a couple of close friends, Jason and Brian. We did quite a bit together, and when it came time to graduate, Jason had to move away to Lexington, South Carolina with his family due to his father's work. After we graduated and he had completed his move with his family, my friend Brian and I were invited to pay a visit for a weekend to his new house. We decided out of boredom to start hiking around in the nearby forest and countryside, which we found had a scenic river. It was a beautiful area and felt quite peaceful, but we ended up getting lost. We decided to keep following the river as we lost track of which direction was upstream or downstream, with no sounds of civilization anywhere we could hear. We quickly became concerned about finding a telephone to call Jason's mom or dad to get us from wherever we were, even though there was no paved road or street that we could find nearby. As we kept following the river, we came to this old church-looking building made of really old red bricks with a dirt parking lot and a dirt road leading up to it. It was very encroached with growth and bushes. We decided to go inside and see if there were people, and maybe ask to use their telephone and get the address for this location. We noticed there were a few old cars which looked to be 70s or 80s, possibly Novas, 4 of them. Very dirty and rusted in this dirt parking lot with flat or missing tires. They were all white colored, or used to be, and parked in a row side by side. As we got closer, we heard gospel music sounds and some singing inside the church. We were relieved that there were people, so we went into the church, which appeared to be rather old and dilapidated. We peeked past the main doors to the hall and saw what I estimated was a couple dozen people dressed as nicely as they could, though they clearly were poor. When we went inside, the old white-haired woman wearing horn-rimmed glasses who was playing the church piano stopped playing, and she looked at us with no expression on her face. What happened next really stuck with me, and I will never forget it as long as I live. Everyone in that church stopped singing and put down their song sheets, and they all slowly turned their heads and looked at us with the most vacant and unwelcoming glares. Jason said, "We're sorry to interrupt. We just want to use your phone to call my folks to come get us." Nobody spoke. It was dead silent in that church other than the wooden pews creaking from the weight of the people in them. So we just slowly backed out of the door and let it close behind us, and looked at each other in ominous fear and quietly left. We started walking up that dirt road, and when Brian mentioned that there were no crosses or anything Christian in there, we looked back up the road to see that maybe a dozen of those people, all men, had walked out in the front of the church and were standing there watching us intently as we walked along the road. This freaked.
Okay, you might want to run. This sounds like the start of every vindictive horror movie I've ever seen.
us out, and we began to sprint up that dirt road for what felt like a good half hour.
Did I say vindictive? I meant every religious-themed horror movie I've ever seen.
We finally came to a very old, broken-down gas station that looked like one of those old full-service stations. We went inside to find that the shelves were mostly empty and dusty from a quick glance, and an old, overly tanned, swarthy man with a really oily and dirty baseball cap was behind the counter reading some old book with ragged edges and yellowed pages. He looked up and said, "You boys lost, huh? Just head out that way you came in and make a left, and follow that road till you see a telephone pole, and just go right at the pole down the trail and it'll take you to a highway." We thanked the man and left quickly, and as we walked down the road to the telephone pole the man told us about, again looked back, and the old man was out in front of the gas station with his arms folded, just staring at us with a rotten tooth grin on his face. We got to the pole, made the right, and followed that trail.
Why is this giving me Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes?
To the nearest highway, after about a good half hour of walking in the twilight. It had just gotten dark as we got to the highway, and we tried to wave down a few people passing by, but nobody stopped. Thankfully, a police officer saw us and pulled over to help us. We told him we were lost and gave him Jason's address, to which he whistled and said we really were lost. It took about 30 minutes for that officer to drive us back to Jason's, and during the chit-chat, he told us we needed to be careful out in those woods, as there are some crazy witch folks in it. A long time ago, I'm talking like 8 years ago, two friends and I, James and Sean, did something really stupid. But at the time, doing stupid things was what we did to pass the time. We're not really friends with James anymore, but Sean and I still talk often, and so oftentimes we'll talk with each other about this story. We were 19 years old. We lived in bumfuck New Jersey. Lots of vacant houses in our old town. And atop a hilly road not far from our houses was an abandoned church. Locals knew about the church. It was on a closed-off road, and it had been abandoned for many years. I'm not sure if it's still standing or what the current state of it is, as I live in Florida now. But James, Sean, and I, being the troublemaking thrill-seekers we were, came up with this genius plan of bringing a Ouija board to the church late one night. This was October.
Kids, you're making a mistake. A lot of places bring a Ouija board and you bring it to an old church. Well, you're asking to be possessed.
So I guess we were doing it in honor of spooky season. Sean had the Ouija board in his closet, so he brought it. I drove the three of us, so I first picked up James, then Sean, and we just drove straight towards the church. Since the road up the hill to the church was literally blocked off, we had to park on the side of the road and walk from there. We followed the road up the hill to the church, using one flashlight at first, so as not to overdo it and draw any possible attention. But once we were atop the hill, we pretty much all three of us turned on our flashlights. The church was surrounded by woods in basically all directions, and had a gravel parking lot alongside it. The church had been broken into a million times before, and was littered with graffiti, so the big front door was already ajar. Two of us had to work together to pull it open because it scraped on the floor though. Once inside, we naturally just looked around the place with our flashlights to make sure no one else was in there. It was definitely creepy being in that place at night. Sean set up the Ouija board. Then he pulled out these 3 candles from his backpack as well, and he laughed and said it would add to the experience. He placed the 3 candles in a triangle formation around the board, and as they were all lit, we turned off our flashlights. Now the only light in the whole place was from the candles, creating a much more eerie and uncomfortable vibe. We really couldn't see more than maybe 6 feet in all directions, so we began playing with the Ouija board. Sean was doing most of the talking. At this point, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he definitely opened with "Is anybody there?" and the typical cliche Ouija board questions. The planchette started to move and we started to laugh. I knew it was one of them doing it. I feel like it's not possible to play with a Ouija board with your friends without someone jokingly moving around the planchette. We went along with it though, and whoever was moving it spelled out a few words. As this was going on though, we heard a weird crack type sound come from the altar of the church. Best way I could describe it is it sounded like a big piece of wood cracking in half. It was loud and it sounded like it was done by someone. We all jumped in reaction and hurried to shine our phone's flashlights in the direction of the altar. There was no one there as far as we could see. I think both of them were just as freaked out as I was after that. But the place was old and falling apart, so some weird noises here and there didn't seem that crazy, and so we kept going. We all took turns asking the board questions, but the planchette was no longer moving. I think because that crack sound freaked all three of us out, and now we were taking it more seriously. This went on for some time, until another sound from the altar area broke the silence again. But before we even had time to shine our lights over there again, something landed on the Ouija board, causing all of us to jump and scream. It was a rock about the size of a golf ball. All three of us just had our hands on the planchette 2 seconds ago, and there was no way any of us could have done that. We all three got up and ran back out of the church screaming, leaving the Ouija board and candles behind. We ran all the way down the hill and back to my car, and fearing we were being chased, we didn't stick around. It drove us all back to James's house, where we just sat in the car for a good half hour talking, wondering what exactly just happened. Sean is very religious and superstitious as well. He was confident we had reached a spirit of some kind. I don't really believe in any of that stuff. I believe there was someone else in the church with us, which I find to be equally terrifying. Sean went back to the church the next day with James to get his Ouija board back. And to make things even stranger, the Ouija board was missing, but the candles were still in place. When they saw it was missing from the entrance, they decided to just leave right away. This remains to be the single scariest experience of my life. This happened in Warren County, Georgia, a very rural inland part of the state. I was with my girlfriend Marissa, and we were driving around checking out the area, seeing if it was somewhere we'd like to live. It was very quiet and spacious, which is what we wanted. We're both Roman Catholic. She likes to go to church a little more than I do, though. It was a weekday in the middle of the day and not much traffic at all. We checked out a bunch of things in the area that would be important to see before deciding on moving to an area. Since Marissa has been an equestrian for most of her life, a big point of us moving to a rural area was for her to have a barn for her horses. After checking out some properties listed for sale, we happened to pass by a small, cute-looking church on the side of this very quiet road with a bunch of cars in the parking lot. This church wasn't far from the last property we just looked at, so Marissa shook my shoulder and said we should see if a mass was going on, see if it's nice. And so I pulled into the little dirt-like parking lot for the building and parked next to some old red minivan. A lot of the cars in the parking lot were on the older side. In fact, I'd say most of them. I mentioned that to Marissa as we got out of the car, and she agreed and said it was probably because it was a lower income area. I opened the door to the church for us and we stepped in, and it was a pretty small inside as we expected. I'd say there were 5 rows of pews, each cut in half in the middle by the nave, or center aisle. There had to be at least 20 people in there, though they were not an older crowd. Usually in every mass, big or small, you'd see a decent amount of seniors, but based on the backs of everyone's heads in there, everyone appeared to be in their 30s to 40s. It seemed everyone was sitting in silence for some kind of prayer. As we sat down in the back, the people closest to us started looking at us, like one at a time, and as others noticed the staring, they would look to see what the others were staring at and then look at us. Marissa and I looked at each other, then nervously looked back at everyone. All we could think to do was smile, but no one smiled back. They were giving us the most unwelcoming stares, and I just realized none of these people were dressed even remotely nicely for a mass. What was going on here? This was when I
You were about to become the sacrifice. And that's not a joke. I can't stress that enough.
realized there were no women in here. Not a single one besides Marissa. And the stares, they seemed to be staring more at Marissa than me. A man in a mask at the front of this alleged church, by what I guess was supposed to be the altar, then stepped up and pointed at us and said, "Who invited you here?" I took it upon myself to answer for us, and said that we were just passing by and saw that a mass was going on and we wanted to join. The man was clearly not a priest, and this was clearly not a Roman Catholic church. The masked man said, "You need to leave now." By now, every last person in the church was looking at us. I said, "Come on, honey," and we got up and hurried out and ran to the car. We wasted no time sitting in the car. I got us out of that parking lot right away, but we both noticed in the rearview mirror someone from the building getting in their van in the parking lot. I felt like there was no way they were going to follow us until we saw that gray van catching up to us in the mirror. I had Marissa GPS the Warren County Sheriff's Office, and we drove straight there. The van was behind us the whole time, not on our ass, but close enough that it was obvious. The second we pulled into the public safety parking lot, the van kept driving down the road. When it was gone, we simply drove straight home and never looked at Warren County again. We clearly ended up in some kind of cult meeting, but I don't get why they had someone follow us, nor why they were having their meeting in broad daylight, or why they didn't at least lock the door.
Well, that sounds like something that'll stick with you.
When I was a Cub Scout, we would always have our meetings somewhere in a Catholic elementary school, whether it was in the school gym or in one of the adjacent rooms. I was like 8 years old when this happened, and it was disturbing. But before I get into why I'm telling you that, let me start from the beginning. It started a few days earlier when I was at Mass with my mom and my brother like we'd go to every other week. We usually would be late, so we'd either sit in the back or stand by the doors if there were no seats. Today, we sat all the way in the back corner. My mom and then brother entered the pew first. I sat on the end. At some point during the Mass, I noticed an older man with glasses and a white mustache who was standing against the wall to the left of me looking at me. As I glanced over, he smiled, and I still remember vividly the stupid, creepy face that he made as he was trying to be funny. but I was 8, I wasn't a toddler. It felt weird and uncomfortable. I did my best to look away, but I could see him keep looking over to me every few seconds. I looked back at him, and once again he made another weird face that I assume he was making to try and be funny. It just came off as weird again. My mom noticed it this time and tapped me on the shoulder and whispered to ignore him. I believe she gave him a dirty look as well. The next time I looked in that direction, the man wasn't there anymore. He had walked somewhere else. The next thing I remember from that mass was going up for communion, and then as I got back to my seat, the man was back in that spot again, and he was staring at me, just smiling the whole time until I got back to my seat. My mom noticed.
Well, this guy might be a pedophile. That's just my assumption.
It again, and since we got the communion, we just left. My mom said on the way out she didn't like the way that guy was looking at us, specifically me. Now fast forward to when scouts come into play. Towards the end of our meetings, we'd sometimes have little fun contests or games, and this day in question we were having a scavenger hunt. The items we were supposed to be finding all tied into the theme of scouting. I remember some of the objects on the list being a first aid kit, a rope, a flashlight, things of that nature. We were split into 2 teams, and we all had a copy of the list, and the team to find the most items would win. So we all split up. The play area ranged from the gym to the cafeteria to some of the adjacent rooms. I was running around rooms and tiny hallways I'd never even seen before, looking for any of the items I could find on the list. I wasn't having much luck. Eventually, I found myself in this very narrow hallway in the back section of the cafeteria by the kitchen. In this hallway was one of those ice cream fridges filled with ice pops. I looked inside the fridge for any of the items, nothing. But then I decided to be sneaky and take one of the ice cream pops. As I did, I heard a man's voice to the right of me. I looked over and saw that man from the church a few days earlier, walking over to me smiling. He said something like, "Don't let them see you taking that." He shut the fridge door and grabbed my hand and told me he had some better treats in the back where the kids aren't allowed. I broke my
No, don't go with him!
hand free from his grip and tried to walk away scared, and he grabbed my wrist this time tightly. I turned to him and he went, "Shh, calm down." I yelled help, and he let go of me and said, "Stop it." I ran back to the gym and told the Cub Master what happened. Thankfully, my Cub Master was an actually nice, caring man, probably because he was a father himself, and he told my mom about it. I told my mom it was that same man from the church, and my Cub Master would help my mom in reporting that man to the church. It turned out that that man worked for the church. I'm not sure what exactly he did, but he lived on the church grounds, which explained why he was there. What makes me sick, though, is that allegations came out against that man from an altar boy's parents, claiming he touched him inappropriately. The disgusting thing is,
Like I said, the guy was a pedophile.
I can imagine what he was planning on attempting to do if I actually followed him to wherever he was trying to take me.
I have pretty good ideas of what he was gonna do, and none of them.
I don't know if that man went to prison or what, but I know the church cut ties with him after this.
No doubt. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. Those were definitely creepy stories. I will say that. That gave me some chills. Just saying, and ooh, that felt wrong. That was, like I said, it was creepy. But like I said, I enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed these creepy stories and stuff as much as I did. And I hope you all have a nice tremendous day. Be sure to leave comments or any videos or other comments down below. Have a nice day and stay classy.